Hello, it is my honor to introduce to you today 4 distinguished panelists in animal law. First, we have Dana Bray. Sorry, 5. First, we have Dana Bray, General Counsel for the International Fund for Animal Welfare, which has offices in 13 countries and works to protect the nation's animals. Before coming to International Fund for Animal Welfare, or IFAW, Dana worked in 3 large law firms in New York, North Carolina, and Louisiana. She serves as Vice Chair for the American Bar Association Animal Law Committee. Next, we have Nathan Hirschler. Nathan is the Program Operations Director for International Fund for Animal Welfare. He develops and implements IFAW's global planning and oversees IFAW's budgets. He previously worked as an attorney and policy advisor for IFAW, where he worked to protect big cats in captivity, polar bears, and caribou. He's been involved with international free trade negotiations and CITES. Next, we have Delciana Winders. Delcy is Harvard Law School's first ever Animal Law and Policy Program Fellow. Previously, she worked as Deputy General Counsel for PETA, and she also lectured at Tulane Law School. In her past, Delcy has done a circuit court clerkship, worked at a private law firm that was focused on animal protection, and also ran the legal program for Farm Sanctuary. Next, we have Chris Green, the Executive Director of our new Animal Law and Policy Program. Chris previously worked as the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Animal Legal Defense Fund and Chair of the American Bar Association's Animal Law Committee. He's an HLS grad, and he's frequently interviewed by news outlets to discuss animal law issues, such as CBS, Dateline, Science Magazine, Chicago Tribune, and Washington Post. He also works in film, music, and art, and manages his family's farm. Next, we have Lien Greenwald. Lee Greenwood runs the lobbying or legislative program for Best Friends Animal Society. And I would like to start by asking everyone, starting with Dina, to just give a short introduction about yourself and animal law.
Thank you so much, Aline. It's really wonderful to be here. Thank you for organizing it. And it's great to see so many interested law students in the field of animal law. We've all seen a lot of change in the field in our careers, and it's really exciting to think about what you all will experience in your working life. So as Aline mentioned, I'm the General Counsel of International Fund for Animal Welfare, and I'm going to just spend a couple minutes introducing the organization to you so you can put both my job and Nathan's job in context, tell you a little bit about what I do, and then turn it over to Nathan, whose job is much more interesting than mine is. So IFAW, some groups focus on individual animals. Other groups focus more on groups of animals and protecting entire habitats. IFAW does a mix. So, IFAW places a value both on protecting species and habitats, but also a value on the welfare of individual animals. And we do our work through a mix of hands-on projects around the world. This is a wonderful elephant orphanage project that we support in Zambia, and other policy work which aims to make, a long-term difference for animals. We're a truly international organization with offices in 13 countries and projects in dozens of other countries. It's a high value at IFAW for us to have local expertise and leadership in all of our jurisdictions. This is James Asiche, our East African director in Kenya. And just to very quickly give you a sense of the breadth of animal issues that we work on, IFAW was founded in 1969 in Canada with a campaign to save seals. That was our founding issue. We also have a very active whales protection program. We do great companion animals work, which I really get very excited about, a lot of it in the developing world. Our animal rescue work is tremendous. Our headquarters is on Cape Cod, and we have a team of marine mammal rescuers who respond to all stranded marine mammals around the Cape and are really global experts. We also, as part of our animal rescue program, respond to disasters and do lots of wildlife rescue and rehabilitation around the world. So just a very quick overview of our work. We have an elephants program and a wildlife trade program. And last but not least, a very successful animal education program in schools around the world. So I'm the general counsel. I'm the in-house lawyer for IFAW. I don't do a lot of direct hands-on work with animals. I do get to bring my dog to work, which is a big plus. But what's really satisfying to me, I do the bread and butter legal and corporate work of the organization. So I was in private practice for about 10 years. I did a lot of litigation. And I bring, my legal experience to support IFAW and, getting its work done around the world. So it's actually, it took me about the last 4 years that I was in private practice to find an animal law job. I was very focused on it. I did as much pro bono and networking as I could do. And I had never really thought about what an in-house position would be like. And I'm finding it very satisfying because I get to be a part of the team of all these wonderful campaigners who are going out and helping animals. And I'm providing a service that they need. And just on a personal level, I may be reviewing a contract and focusing on the indemnity provision and the dispute resolution provision, but it's a contract for us to share supplies with another nonprofit in the event of a disaster so that we could both help animals most effectively. So I really have enjoyed it. And I will, just to give you a sense, when you're in-house, they say you have to be a mile wide, you may be an inch deep. You have to sort of have basic familiarity with a lot of different legal areas, be conversant with the different jurisdictions that you're working in, certainly in an international organization, and that's part of what keeps the work challenging and rewarding. So I will turn it over to Nathan.
That was awesome. Thank you guys again also for having me, also from IFAW. I actually had a different path into the field. I feel like I always say that I sort of feel like I lucked into into getting a job right out of law school, working for an organization. But tactically, I actually went to law school thinking that this was going to be one of my two possible paths. The other one was working on human rights types of issues internationally as well. And so actually chose my law school that focused on international law type of issues, and spent the entire time there trying to get internship opportunities working for a number of the organizations that do this type of work. And so I worked, like Delcy, with Meyer Glissenstein and Crystal at the Times, now Meyer Glissenstein and Eubanks, and HSUS, and Compassion Over Killing, and a number of organizations down in DC that gave me a lot of experience and opportunity to sort of leverage that into first knowing the people in the field and then getting into it eventually, working out of IFAW's Washington, D.C. office, where we did a mix of litigation and policy stuff at the time. Shortly after I started working there, the organization came out with a new policy, actually, that sort of limited our ability to do litigation, and so that was a bit of a shift, and actually I had to sort of shift my perspective to some extent following that. So I focused more on policy stuff after the first year and a half in the organization. I moved up into my current job, which is Program Operations Director, which means essentially nothing and everything. But roughly speaking, I work with our senior leadership, especially on the program side, to make sure that all of our programs across the world and all of our country office strategic plans are as impactful as possible. So I work with them on a mix of conservation and animal welfare program planning, and then on the back end side to align the budgets and human resources that the organization has to those different strategies. And that's an integration sort of point. So I work with all the sort of support departments as well to make sure that the groups like development and our communications programs around the world are effectively aligned to make sure that programs are implemented as effectively as possible. But also in doing things like delivering training to staff on a lot of the different skills and tactics that they might need to do some of the work. And so that's allowed me to do a little bit of training on things like the use of policy and litigation in some of these contexts as well. And so I've been doing that for the last 3 years. I also have some experience. I was the chair of the Maryland State Bar Association's Animal Law section And I haven't worked with the ABA at all, but I got to meet Carter when he worked with HSUS, which is great, and so I've worked under him with who's now at ALDF. So it's been a fun ride, and it's exciting times that we're entering into.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Delcy. I am the Animal Law and Policy Fellow here. I just started in August. Before that, I was with the PETA Foundation. I went to law school specifically and only to do animal law, and like Nathan, I was very lucky to be able to go straight into that right out of my judicial clerkship. And not only to be able to do exclusively animal law, but to work with some incredible mentors who've helped me to get to where I am and continue to mentor me even 10 years later. So I've been practicing animal law for about 10 years, and I was with the PETA Foundation for about 5 of those, and there I headed up a team of lawyers, veterinarians, biologists, and others, where we looked at using the law to advocate on behalf of wild animals used in entertainment. So a lot of our efforts were focused on elephants who are used in circuses, bears, chimpanzees, big cats at roadside zoos, those kinds of situations. My work has been a pretty fair division between lobbying, working directly with law enforcement agents, regulatory work, and good old litigation. And I've liked having all of those different areas. Also because I was within a national nonprofit, and before that another farm sanctuary, also a national nonprofit, I did a fair amount of media work, and I also did a lot of consulting on campaigns related to my legal matters. And I really enjoyed that because I feel like you can see, the legal efforts are really just one piece of a bigger picture of advocating for animals, and when you're able to be involved in all of it, you can really see how it fits in with everything else. It's probably not surprising when you're advocating on behalf of animals who don't have a lot of legal protections and who people make a lot of profits from exploiting. It's really challenging, and you lose a lot. But I don't really want to talk about things that I've lost. Instead, I just want to throw out a couple examples of some of the things I've worked on that I'm most proud of and that have made my work satisfying. So one of those is being part of a coalition of folks who got bans on bullhooks passed across the country. Bullhooks, some of you may know, they look like a big fireplace poker. They have a sharp metal hook and basically a stabby thing at the end, and they're used to force elephants to perform in circuses. It's undisputed. You cannot make an elephant perform or give rides without using these implements, and they're used on the most sensitive parts of elephants' body, where they actually have really thin skin, so behind their ears, under their chins, behind their knees, areas like that. And we've been able to get these devices banned in jurisdictions across the country, and Ringling Brothers actually cited this local legislation in March when it announced that it will be phasing out its use of elephants in its acts. I've also been able to help rescue more than 36 bears from roadside zoos, bears who were some of them in concrete pits, some of them, one who was in a concrete dog run, one who was kept permanently in the dark in a shed, and all of those bears are now at reputable sanctuaries, getting to live like bears. Also brought litigation that ended the U.S. Fish and Wildlife's decades-long policy of secretly giving out permits to deal in endangered animals to circuses and roadside zoos and others. And as Aline mentioned, I also taught animal law for several years, and that has also been really rewarding. I really like working with students. And because of that, and because of the fact that the number one thing I've encountered working in animal law is agencies and law enforcement's failure to implement laws they're tasked with implementing and failing the animals they're supposed to be protecting, I'm really excited to be in this fellowship position now because I get to spend 100% of my time researching and writing and thinking about what are some really realistic, politically viable things we can do to improve the situation for animals, because there's only so much you can accomplish through litigation and legislation. So I'm thrilled to be here. Since I'm on campus, I'm happy to chat with any of you who are interested in animal law, if it's academic, practical, a combination. And if you're not able to stick around and chat today, I'm around on campus all the time. So thanks. Chris?
Thanks again for showing up. Delcy and I knew Delcy when I was living in New York. She was actually a student at NYU, and very much like Lien was just a dynamo. You had speakers that seemed like every other week, and it was pretty amazing. I have sort of a really non-traditional path to get here. I initially came to law school to do environmental work. Became pretty disenchanted with that after my first year, so I took a 6-year leave of absence, which my grandmother called the leave of senses, and to do music business entertainment work. In that process, I decided I still wanted to pursue my first love of being a veterinarian, which a high school guidance counselor talked me out of, saying I would never get good enough grades to get into vet school. And so I had a spot waiting at U of I's vet school and was all set to do that when the former dean of students here called me up to say, hey, it's been 6 years, dude, are you coming back? The administrative board is changing and this could be your window closing. And I was like, no, I think I'm going to go to vet school. And she's like, well, funny you should mention that because we've got this guy coming in next year to teach this animal rights law class named Steve Wise. And Harvard will be only the 9th school ever to teach this course, so it's sort of a big deal. So I researched it and looked really interesting, and the vet school was cool with holding a spot for me. So I decided to come here to do that. And took the class with Steve, and his light bulb went off. I thought this is really interesting, and I've since written some stuff together. Became a real great mentor to me. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's also the one who heads up the Non-Human Rights Project that is doing a lot of litigation over certain chimpanzees that have been held captive in certain situations. But I still, having taken the class, I then finished my coursework, and I actually postponed my graduation date by 2 years to do sort of a self-financed fellowship. I went out on tour with one of the Metallica guys and saved up enough cash in those 6 months that I could fund myself spending 2 years doing nothing but exclusively thinking and writing this sort of larger piece of scholarship. And that just the world, and it was on sort of companion animal damages and vet malpractice, and so just because I had an interest in both, and the sort of world turned under my feet, and it became the issue that so many people really needed to know about at the time. So it sort of kind of catapulted me. It got published and catapulted me sort of in the spotlight of the field generally. And so I started getting invited to conferences and speaking, and would lecture at friends who were teaching animal law courses. I would lecture around. And so for the next, I would say, 10 years, 5 years, or 7 years, I was able to kind of still do entertainment work as my primary source of income, but do animal law stuff on the side. I would lecture around a lot, teach at friends' courses, still do some writing here and there. And it was only back in 2012 where some circumstances in my life changed. My grandmother passed away, so it freed up some time, that this ALDF job just sort of fell from the sky. And I had been at a conference down actually in New Orleans with Delcy, and something happened with this other project, and came back just really doing some soul searching, like, wow, it'd been a little while since I'd spoken, and just saw so many great colleagues there and realized that that's really where my heart lied. And so I went to ALDF's website just to look at what other conferences were coming up on to kind of get back in the swing. And they just so happened to have bundled opportunities and events on the same button. So I click at looking for events. I see job listings. I was just sort of shocked because in our day there were so few jobs that anything would just evaporate immediately via word of mouth. I couldn't believe there was actually a job listings for animal law. And the first one listed was the ALDF job. And given the research I'd done on the civil damages companion animal evaluation issue, I was not a fan of litigation as far as my own temperament goes. I mean, the sum total of my litigation experience is representing myself in traffic court, and I successfully, I might add. But I always felt that changing a law, that legislation, was where my mindset lied, and so ALDF was just in this position of creating a whole new legislative department, and it was a wonderful experience. We had successes. We've helped, because that's the other thing with this, which I spoke about last night. Surveys show, almost any survey shows that Americans want to see increased animal welfare and reduced animal cruelty. Specifically on the issue of farmed animals, 94% of Americans feel that animals raised for food or fiber should not endure any suffering or cruelty. I mean, that's astounding. You look at any other social issue, marriage equality, racial issues, anything, I defy you to find one that has sort of 94% uniformity among the American populace. Yet, when you look at the legislation, there pretty much are zero laws that protect animals while they are being raised. It's just essentially a few minutes before they're slaughtered and sometimes during transport. So since we have this vast public sentiment on these issues, it's sort of I viewed it as my job to then find a way to galvanize and channel that into having some sort of positive political outcome. And so, I always went into a situation, legislative situations, like I know the numbers are on my side. It just we need to find a way to get this to translate. So some great examples of that were with the ag-gag laws. I think there have been 26 ag-gag laws introduced across 17 states since 2013, and of all of those, we were able to shut down all but 2, and one of those 2 was determined to be unconstitutional last August. Another bill that slipped through in Arizona, again, the surveys in Arizona showed that 87% of Arizona voters opposed this measure to take livestock out of the cruelty code on a very specific issue. Even 85% of Republican voters, yet the legislature still passed it. And it went to the governor's desk, and he had 5 days whether to sign or veto it. So all the major groups pushed out action alerts. We did a thing targeting the tourism board, and that was on a Thursday afternoon. By Monday, animal advocates had driven in 19,248 calls or emails to Governor Ducey's office. Guess how many calls and emails he got asking him to sign the measure? 3. So money in politics is only effective to the degree that it helps you win elections or helps a politician win elections. When you've got 19,248 to 3, that's pretty simple math for an elected official. And so Governor Ducey issued his first veto. So here you've got a Republican governor in a heavily Republican-dominated legislature, Republican state, vetoing a bill that's being pushed by one of the biggest industries in his state. I mean, 5 years ago, I think anyone up here would have said that was just lunacy if you would expect that to happen. And then we did a repeat in North Carolina. We actually got another Republican governor to veto the ag-gag bill there. Unfortunately, the legislature overrode his veto. But that's on the defense side. On the offense side, was able to help get some legislation passed in Texas addressing the issue of police shooting people's dogs during raids. And kind of marrying of my 2 interests, I just produced a film on this called Of Dogs and Men that's premiering at the Austin Film Festival this Sunday. So I'm jumping on a plane tomorrow to head on down for that. With that, I'll leave it to Lee.
Is this on? Yeah. So thank you for having me. It's really exciting to be on this panel, and frankly, even more exciting just to see all of you guys out there and see such an interest in animal law. It's inspirational for me, and I'm sure for all of us here. Chris said, it's funny, you said you took a non-traditional path. Oh, sorry. My name is Lien Greenwald. I work for Best Friends Animal Society. I'm a legislative attorney for them, which basically means I'm a lobbyist. I go all over the country working on legislation that is either favorable for dogs and cats or trying to kill bills that are bad for those animals. Best Friends is the only national animal welfare organization that focuses on ending the killing of the unnecessary killing of animals in our shelters, companion animals. So we focus on cats and dogs primarily. We have a wonderful animal sanctuary out in southern Utah. I don't know if any of you have been out there, but it's truly a special place. It's down right on the Arizona-Utah border, and it's really wonderful. So anyway, a little bit about myself. Chris was saying he took a non-traditional path, and I certainly have as well to get to where I am today. Mine had a lot less rock and roll and fun stuff, but I've been working in politics for my whole professional career. I started out of college in D.C. I worked on the Hill down there for a number of different senators, and I did that for a number of years, kind of got my feet wet and figured out how the federal legislative process works, as much as one can figure that out, and as much as one can do in 3 or 4 years. But, I got a good sense of the legislative world down there, and I loved it, and I went to law school with the intention of moving back to D.C. and getting back involved in that. And that's what I did. I wasn't working on animal issues. I was working in the world of mental health policy, and I did that for a trade association down in right outside of D.C. in Old Town, Virginia. I did that for about 4 or 5 years then. And then did some other stuff, moved abroad for a little while, and then I was working actually in the Gold Dome over here at the State House. I worked for a state rep there for a while when I moved to Boston. My wife actually went to Hugsy, so just across the street there, which brought us back here. And then my sister, who is strangely also in the animal welfare world, she's also a lawyer. She is the animal welfare editor for the Huffington Post, so she writes lots and lots of fun stories about dogs and cats and other types of animals. So she actually emailed me or called me or something and said, Best Friends, who we all knew just from knowing it, she said they're hiring and you need to apply. And you know, I'm an animal lover from the beginning, as is everyone in my family. We grew up with dogs, we grew up with cats living outside. Everyone is allergic in my family, unfortunately, to cats. But so I've always been interested in animal issues, but more as an advocate. You know, I did a lot of, well, as an advocate and on the ground, I did a lot of fostering when I lived in D.C. Obviously, we adopted our dog, who is the best little dog. I was saying little Kaya. I wish I had a picture to show you. You'd get a lot of awes. But so I did that for a while. But really, my background, like I said, is in legislation. I've done it on the state level, on the federal level, and so Best Friends was looking for a lawyer who had some experience similar to what I had. You know, what I do is I work with cities, with towns, with counties all across the country and on the state level to try to get bills that are good for companion animals. So right now I'm on the Pit Bull Terrier team. So we have 3 main initiatives at Best Friends. One is on puppy mills, one is on community cats. That's another way. That's what we call feral cats. Community cats is a nicer term. And then we have the Pit Bull Terrier initiative, and that's the initiative that I'm on, and that's what I focus on. So my main focus is to work on ending breed discriminatory laws all over the country. So there's laws all over this country, unfortunately, that discriminate, frankly, against particular types of dogs, oftentimes Rottweilers, Pit Bull Terrier-like dogs. And so my job is to try to fight those on the local level and then to find states where we can pass state-level laws that prohibit those types of laws. So Massachusetts is actually one of 19 states that has a state law that prohibits local municipalities from passing any type of breed discriminatory law. And it's great. We're working on a bill in Michigan right now to make Michigan the 20th. We're hoping to have a few victories next year when things get started again. But yeah, that's pretty much what I focus on. So, you know, I know a lot of my colleagues here, they focus on different areas of animal law. I think it's neat to see a wealth or a breadth of diversity here, where you know, some people focus on this part of animals, on wildlife. Some folks, you know, I focus on companion animals, and then kind of everything in between. I certainly didn't know any of when I was in law school. We didn't have this at my law school, you know. So this is really exciting to see, and again, thank you for having me.
Thank you all so much. So Lee sort of touched on this, but for everyone, I want to ask you, why do you work in animal protection?
I work in animal protection because, you know, I went to law school because I saw law as a tool for change in the world, and I'm most moved by animals suffering, and I knew that if I could have my professional life align with that high value that I have, that I would be a much happier lawyer, and I'm much happier. My job satisfaction, you couldn't even compare it to sort of how I felt about my law firm job. My law firm job was challenging. I learned a lot. I became a lawyer. I had wonderful mentors down the hallway. I'm able to now bring all those skills to bear for IFAW, but I am a much, much happier person because my work is aligned with my heart now.
That's a good question. I always loved animals. Loved animals. like from when I was very little. You know, Wild America was my show. I was watching it from like 3 on. I guess I had my aha moment about sort of animal law when I got into philosophy as an undergrad, and so I had a class that was teaching sort of political and normative philosophy type of stuff. And actually, I read Christine Korsgaard's book, and I think Christine works at here as sources of normativity. And actually, through that, then she writes about animal rights issues from a sort of neo-Kantian perspective, and then sort of jumped into sort of the other stuff from there. So I got really intrigued about the sort of role and relationship that we have with animals from a philosophical perspective first, and then sort of saw that fit to sort of how I just sort of felt the emotive response that I had towards animals from early childhood. And sort of made a decision there that I wanted to. It was the thing that made me happy, and I sort of decided to that was a pathway that I was going to be willing to take from a career perspective that fit and felt right for me. So I think that was my moment.
For me, I think animal advocacy is sort of at the cutting edge of social justice. I've been involved not just in animal advocacy, but human rights issues and other types of social justice issues since I was pretty young. And advocating on behalf of animals, I think you're working on behalf of those who have the least voice currently in our system and who suffer tremendously. But I also think there's a lot of intersection with human protections as well, workers' rights, health issues, economic disparities. So it's nice to be involved on such an intersectional issue.
Kind of the way I got pulled into this, as Aline mentioned, I currently own and manage an Illinois farm that's remained in my family for 178 years. Which I was happy to point out in those hearings was 75 years longer than Arizona's even been a state. So I'm being accused of some animal rights carpetbagger who doesn't understand agriculture. It was fun to throw that back at them. But as a small child, right now it's all corn and beans, edamame, I like to say. As a small child, there were definitely animals on the farm. And it was interacting with them that got my brain going at a very young age, that, especially the piglets, just how fun and happy they seemed, and how interactive and individualized they were. They weren't just some, even product. They were unique individuals, and that kind of got me realizing, even at that age, that they, in my mind, they had a value much greater than the weight of their flesh, which is kind of how they were being evaluated otherwise. And also being an only child with a single mom, I had a cat and a dog at different times that were sort of the best friends in my life. So, I've had an affinity and kind of cared about both of those issues. And the reason I focused specifically on companion animal issues for so long was that when I was here, Steve Wise's book had just come out, Rattling the Cage, was about primate cognition and issues related to that. And that was great in my view of getting all sort of the pointy heads and intellectuals thinking about these issues. You have guys like Tribe and Dershowitz debating them, and it was all over the media. But for most average Americans, it was still sort of words on a page because they'd never actually interacted with a bonobo or a chimpanzee. So he's kind of going around, trying to affect the larger consciousness about animal treatment generally. Steve was kind of going this route, so I thought I would kind of take this angle and deal with the animals that humans, Americans, were most emotionally closest to, not just biologically closest to, and that was their cats and dogs, as a way of still trying to get at this central point of just generally, I think for me it even transcends animal, not just getting people to be more conscious and kinder to non-human animals, but also to each other as well. And I think, companion animal ownership does sort of deepen people's emotional well in that regard as well.
Not to put too simplistic point on it, but frankly, what got me interested in animal issues was my dog, Barky. Barky was our family dog, and I know this is kind of silly sounding, but it's the God's honest truth. In the late 90s, my sister called my family one day, and she was at Columbia for law school, and and she announced over the phone that her friend had found this dog in the park, and she was going to adopt it. And we were all thrilled. We come from a family of dog people, so this was really exciting. Oh, Ara's growing up, and she's adopting a dog. That's wonderful. And she told us that she was adopting a Barky, who is a American Staffordshire Terrier. And we say, oh, great, that's wonderful. So, my mom the next day at work is relaying this story to her friends and her colleagues, and she's saying, oh, my daughter just adopted an American Staffordshire Terrier, and blah, 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 and everybody's, oh, that's wonderful. And then afterwards, one of my mom's colleagues came up to my mom and said to her, Linda, my mom, Linda, that means pit bull, right? American Staffordshire Terrier, that means pit bull. And she didn't know that. We didn't know that at the time. This was, again, the late 90s. And my mom kind of, her jaw dropped, and again, flash forward to that night, my mom's back on the phone with my sister and telling her, you can't keep that dog, that's a pit bull. You can't have that dog. We just didn't know. We grew up with golden retrievers in our house. This was, I lived in suburban Rhode Island. This is just not the place where at the time you saw these types of dogs. And anyway, you know how the story goes. Barky became our family dog. She was the best dog in the world. She used to sleep in bed with all of us. It was the most amazing animal that you could imagine. And you really see it when you have a pit bull. When you're walking down the street, people will, it's not a cliche, people will literally cross to the other side of the street. People will give you looks. People will respond the way that frankly we responded. And as we got to know Barky, and as she became part of our family, which, by the way, I will just say, we're doing stats, 84% of Americans believe that their dog is a member of their family, which is, I think, goes nicely with the stats that Chris was saying. But anyway, as Barky was part of our family, we realized she's just a stupid dog, she's a dog like any other dog. She's just an individual, and that really got me interested in pit bull issues. It got me interested in why these dogs are stigmatized and misunderstood, and it made me want to help them, frankly, and now that I'm on the pit bull team, I get to have the best job title in the world. I'm a pit bull lawyer. So my parents are very confused by what my sister and I do, but I think they're happy about it. Yeah.
Okay, so I have one more question, and then at this time we could take audience questions. Some people might need to leave in like 5 or 10 minutes if they have class, but everyone else should stay. Could you all please tell us a war story?
I'll start, but I'm not actually going to tell you. I'm just going to say that I'm not going to talk about being referenced in a RICO lawsuit brought by Ringling Brothers and having Ringling Brothers come after me and try to hold me jointly and severally liable for millions of dollars of legal fees.
I'm so happy I wasn't involved in that. I need to think of one. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so people ask me what I do. Like I said, I'm a lobbyist, so I'm involved in the legislative lawmaking process, and that is, it's not so much a war story, but that is, if anyone's interested in going into that, just understand that is a disgusting, gross, there's a reason they call it, I don't like the sausage analogy, but there's a reason that they call it, you don't want to see the sausage being made, because it's kind of gross, and every time that you go into trying to get a bill passed, you're going to have very strange bedfellows. You're going to be aligned with people or organizations that you would be very surprised that you are working with, and sometimes opposed to people who you would think otherwise you'd be opposed to. So not so much a war story, but just that's the reality of the world that I live in, at least.
Yeah, just to follow up on what Lee said about how he got into this with his family dog. In my research, I came across this great story about Jane Goodall, how she claims that what first got her interested in animal welfare issues was her dog Rusty, her love for her dog Rusty. And even though she is now known as sort of, Ms. Chimpanzee worldwide, she said if she were sitting on a hill and looking down and there were two different research facilities, and one was torturing dogs and one was torturing chimpanzees, she said her heart would probably make her go down and try and shut down the one that was torturing dogs first, because that's where her initial heart lied. I think the thing I enjoyed most about my legislative job was being able to sort of parachute into these different locales and work really closely with amazing people on the ground who knew every nook and cranny of the landscape, their own political landscape, and were working so hard on various issues. I think this question came up last night about sort of the rights versus welfare debate and where you stand on sort of improving conditions. And, there was an interesting interchange I saw. We had a press conference when we were trying to kill this terrible bill in Arizona that would have taken livestock out of the cruelty code and put them in their own separate but equal category that would have been only administered by the Arizona Department of Agriculture. Would have forbidden any cities or towns from passing stricter farm animal welfare provisions and a whole host of other terrible things. So we're just trying to kill this. This is defense. It's not something we're pushing forward. We're just trying to kill this. And at this press conference, a couple of senators and folks spoke. And then some activists showed up afterwards and started in front of the TV cameras and started yelling about something and how this was watered down or something. And it was kind of frustrating because, of course, what are the TV cameras going to cover? Are they going to cover the senator talking really intelligently about this or some kid screaming at the tree? And interestingly, we all end up at the same restaurant, the same vegan restaurant afterwards. We're there eating, and the activist kids come in, and a colleague of mine went up to him and just said, "Dude, what was your intent there? Like, we're trying to kill something. We're not trying to pass something watered down. We're trying to stop something bad from happening to animals, and you doing this kind of messes that up." And they were kind of going back and forth, and he's like, so my friend was like, "How much do you care about animals?" Like, "Oh, I care. He's like, "What would you do to help the cause of animal, suffering?" Like, "I do anything. I do have to do anything." He's like, "Okay, would you cut your hair and put on a suit and tie?" Because that's actually what it takes to get something accomplished in the Arizona legislature. That we're trying to kill this thing. Like, are you willing to take out your piercings and do that? And it was just kind of interesting to see this, this interchange between this colleague of mine and somebody else. But I think that kind of captures that a little bit.
That's a great one. So I'm going to build on it. So we run into this a lot too from a cultural relativism perspective, and so we deal in international contexts. And so we have we're an organization that's heavily American and European, and we're working in the developing world. And so, for example, we're working with Maasai communities outside of Amboseli National Park in Kenya and in Tanzania, and it's a pastoralist community. And to get anything done, you have to be able to work with them on pastoralist issues. And so, one of the challenges that we've been dealing with recently is how to deal with the fact that the animals that they currently are raising, the cows they're currently raising, are actually being trekked from Amboseli National Park and the surrounding areas to Nairobi, where they're then being slaughtered. The community itself, during that time period, they're losing like 30-40% of their body weight. A number of them are dying, and they're suffering. I mean, it's a horrible way. It's a really long trip, and they're doing it on foot in the desert or semi-arid landscape. The community has asked for a local slaughterhouse, and so the conservation organizations in that area are actually are trying to work with the local community to develop this, and they're coming up with market-based solutions, and it raises for an organization like IFAW, that is an animal welfare organization rather than an animal rights organization, for all of that distinction and what that means. So that's another war story, those internal conversations. But it's a tremendously fascinating thing to sort of deal with. Like, how do you feel like you're going to be able to work in some of these areas if you're not going to take sort of an incrementalist type of approach to doing some of this work? That one hasn't materialized into anything controversial at this point, because the organization has a pretty firm stance that we're not going to support the opening and operation of a slaughterhouse. But the fact of the matter is, we're not speaking up against it either. And so what does that mean from our role from a complicity perspective?
And I would just turn this into a quick my answer, it goes to what can you do to find an opportunity in animal law? Come to these panels. This is great. When you're out in the working world, you may, a lot of my job decisions were driven by my debt, so I was not, doing my passion right out of law school, but I took every opportunity to do pro bono work. I would urge you all to get involved with the American Bar Association Animal Law Committee. Law students can join the ABA for free and become a member of the Animal Law Committee. You can ask Chris or I for details about that, and that's a wonderful way to get involved. And then if you can't find a pro bono animal law matter to get involved on, just do volunteer work. I ended up doing a ton of TNR, trap, neuter, return work with cats that led to a pro bono matter for Alley Cat Allies trying to change a local ordinance to allow for more humane treatment of community cats. And the war story, it was a great process. We had the local shelter officials on our side. We were doing all these community discussion groups. It was wonderful. The last step was to go to the Durham Director of Public Health and convince her why they needed a cat-friendly TNR ordinance in Durham. And so I put so much time into this, and we walked into the Durham Public Health Director's office, and she basically said, "You're here about cats. You're here about feral cats. I don't have time for this." She just shut us right down. But through that, I made great connections at Alley Cat Allies. So that's what I would just say to you all is just take whatever the opportunity is, take it. It's going to go somewhere that you can't even imagine right now.
Does anyone in the audience have a question?
That was really helpful. I was just curious if anyone else on the panel had other advice they would give.
And I forgot to mention, this is a great book, Careers in Animal Law by Yolanda Eisenstein. Super practical and helpful.
I think it's been said already, but I think network. Go to events, join, bar association committees, talk to people in the field, talk to people who are doing what you want to do. That's the only reason I was able to get into the field, I think.
Yeah, I would say that's a huge thing, is just getting to know folks. So there's an annual conference that goes on at Lewis and Clark every year. That was just last weekend. Last night there was a Mass State Bar Association has an animal law group, which I spoke to, and there were some great folks there. And in the spring, we're hosting the National Animal Law Competition here. It's an annual sort of moot court, and there's 3 different areas of it. One is traditional appellate oral advocacy, which Delcy wrote the problem for. The other is a closing argument, sort of criminal case, and one is a legislative lobbying issue, which I just drafted at 4 in the morning. What's great about that, though, is the judges. There's about 30 people that come in to judge that competition, and it literally is a who's who of the animal law field. So it is and there's a lot of time that's set aside for receptions and things where students can actually interact with these judges, and it is, and last year, in fact, one of the judges that I had picked, the same guy I referenced a minute ago, was one of the judges for the legislative area, and he has already hired one of the students who came through and competed in front of him because she was so good. So that's a fantastic opportunity. That's going to be the weekend of February 19th.
And
Sorry, I just wanted to add something. You guys are really lucky to be here and to be here now. I think just represented by, we're all animal lawyers in the Boston area. I can think about 5 more off the top of my head. That's incredible. So you have great resources right here.
yeah, I would also add, if anybody's interested in doing the kind of stuff that I do, go get an internship at the State House, because if you don't know how legislation works, you're not going to be much use to me, frankly, as an employee or as an intern. I need somebody who we're always looking for people who have the passion for what they're doing, but also the skill set to actually do what we want to get done. So
Just wash your hands frequently.
anywhere, that's good advice for anywhere. Yeah.
Does anyone else have a question?
Yeah, I don't know if you could give some general advice on, because you mentioned just professionalism, but getting people, a higher power to take you guys serious, to take anyone seriously with an animal law. I don't know if you could give general advice to that.
Repeat the question for the thing. So, Namita is asking about advice for how to get someone to take you seriously in animal law.
Well, again, from a legislative perspective, I work with legislators all day, every day. And so if you want to, in my opinion, the way to be successful on the issues that I care about and that I work most on, don't go in and tell wonderful stories about your dog. Those stories are important. That builds the passion for getting advocates involved. But frankly, understand the world that you're operating in. Again, in the legislature, on the state, the federal level, whatever, you're operating in their world, and you need to communicate the way that they communicate and understand that. And I think that's always a challenge, frankly, when you're trying to build up grassroots folks or advocates. Everybody is very, very passionate, and understandably so. We're all passionate too. But understand that you're operating, if you're trying to get a bill passed, in somebody else's world, and you have to communicate the way that they understand how to communicate.
Yeah, just following up on that, I think there's tons of social research that shows that people are more likely to take seriously or be influenced by people that kind of are similar to them or relate to them. That's the cause of a lot of discrimination, but it's also a tool that you can use to sort of, find some way to relate to the people you're trying to convince or affect. So in the legislative realm, unfortunately that means, sort of, dressing the way they dress, speaking the way they speak. I spent a month of my life that'll never get back down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, dealing with this, trying to get this stupid tiger out of a stupid cage at a truck stop, and a bill related to that. And I had to go to all these super gross, the elephant stomp and the donkey romp, and all these sort of Republican fundraiser things. And, it was gross, but it's like, at some level, you could find a way to relate to these people, and usually actually was through their hunting dogs or companion animals, and that was your entree into getting them to listen. What I had to talk about, this tiger in a cage, which none of them cared about, but I had to find a way to make them care about that. Within the community, I would say a way to sort of have people take seriously is work hard. Offer to do work for somebody. Obviously, just show initiative. When we're looking at folks to hire, it's always the people that pop on the radar, like, oh, that person sort of attended each of these symposia that we were all at, huh? And they took the initiative to go do that and to make themselves known and offer to help with something or connect somebody. Here we're pretty fortunate going here. I mean, Justin Marceau is an alum, and he is he's an endowed animal law chair at University of Denver Law School. And he's the lead attorney on all the ag cases and got the Idaho law struck down. He found himself on a panel with the judge who was hearing that case about a month before, and he was kind of trying to lay low, not wanting to see him as being inappropriate. And the judge is the one who figured it out, like, Marceau, where do I know that name? Like, oh, wait a minute. He's like, oh, yeah, I'm kind of the guy doing the case. He's like, oh, you went to Harvard, right? And so indicated the judge had already researched the litigators who were handling that case, and it mattered to that judge where Justin had gone to school, which again is sort of gross in reality, but it is a reality, and so finding ways that you can use that to your advantage.
I don't think I have anything substantial to add to that. It's been great advice.
Just a plug. I'm also work very hard to have a law student intern at all times at IFA if possible. So we have a summer internship and a fall and spring semester internship to work with me on assisting IFA with legal and corporate matters. They're unpaid internships, but they've been great learning experiences for everyone who's done it so far. And summer on the Cape is not that bad. So keep it in mind as you're looking for opportunities.
Yeah, and just to add to that one, we offer the same thing in our Washington, D.C. office for anybody that's interested in policy type of work. And for anybody who is a resident of any of the other countries that we work in, that is a possibility in those countries as well. And sometimes those are paid. Often those are paid, especially in other countries, and we've done the same thing in the D.C. office as well. And again, just building on that one, I think it's not just meet them where they are, but impress them. And so do the best work and be the most pragmatic and be the best dressed.
Yeah, and Delcy and I are here. We're a resource here for you guys to lean on. There's already 2 students who are going to be doing J-term clinicals placements, one with HSUS and one with ALDF. We we know a lot of the people that are in the field and interact with a lot of those different organizations and can give you advice on, find out where your particular interests lie and which organization or which person within that organization might give you the best mentorship and have, things aligned. And for the record, I hate wearing ties. I used to have hair down to my ass. I mean, I don't do this for fun. And the reason I'm dressed like this primarily is because I'm running to the State House as soon as we're done with this, because there's this terrible bill to set up a livestock commission that's trying to undercut the ballot initiative that's going on. But that's another thing, if you guys want to be involved in right now, there's collecting signatures for the Massachusetts Farm Animal Protection ballot initiative. The coalition has rented an 8-bedroom house over in Fenway that they have about 20 people staying at and going out and collecting signatures, and it's a really great sort of sense of camaraderie over there, and you can directly interact with Matt Dominguez, who is the guy in my view when it comes to farm animal protection legislation.
Thank you all for coming. We're now going to open it up to just informal discussion, and we're going to eventually try to move over to the Hark for coffee and cookies.
Thanks, Aline, for putting this on.